In this video, we're going to be covering the two most popular entry-level multi-crew ships in Star Citizen. That is the RSI Constellation Andromeda and the Drake Corsair. I have picked the Andromeda for this because that is the gunship variant and is one of the most, one of the more popular variants of the ship. And this is, kind of a PvP-focused channel, so this is what you would normally see in PvP. I know the Corsair is not technically a gunship, and I also know that technically it is an explorer ship. Without any real variance, I find that since it's kind of a jack-of-all-trades, it is probably most similar to the Andromeda in terms of its performance and intended role, regardless of any Drake advertisements or marketing. So we are going to begin. The Constellation Andromeda will be in red, and the Corsair will be in blue. We are only going to cover stats that are important. There are a lot of stats in Star Citizen, and a lot of them don't do anything or don't matter. So we're only going to cover, well, what matters. Looking at hull durability, also known as HP, we can see a significant difference here. The Constellation Andromeda has a lot more HP. In some cases, it has twice as much as a total HP pool. The body's not that different. The body is typically what you need to explode on a ship for it to die. So that's only about 5k difference. The body on the Andromeda is 20k, and the Corsair is at 15k. Not too big of a difference. The total HP pool is significantly higher, with the Andromeda being 180,000 total HP, and the Corsair being 91,000 total HP. You may think to yourself, well, geez, this is way more powerful. Hold on. Take a look at the total parts. The Constellation Andromeda has a lot more parts, about double the amount of parts that the Corsair has. Each one of those parts has to have HP. The more parts you have, the more HP the ship has in total. Keep that in mind. While we're on the topic of survivability here, let's take a look at the armor. Now, the armor here is pretty similar, and we're going to round up and round down. The Andromeda is 50% physical damage reduction, and the Corsair is 60% physical damage reduction. This is important, but it's not that different. The amount of physical damage you get is only really from missiles. That's really where it's most applicable. So missiles are your biggest threat for that, but mostly players and even NPCs are using lasers right now, so it's not that big a deal. But it is worth noting that the Corsair does have technically more armor than the Andromeda. Moving over to cargo, we can see that the Andromeda has a pretty respectable lead over the Corsair. The personal inventory is 96,000 compared to the 78,000 of the Corsair, and the cargo SCUs for the Andromeda are 96 compared to the 72 of the Corsair. That's a pretty big difference. The emissions, or otherwise known as detection range of this ship, is significantly higher for the Corsair. The idle EM is 24,000, okay, 24k, whereas the Andromeda is only about 10k comparatively. That's a pretty damn big difference. Active EM is even higher at 27,000 compared to the Andromeda's 11,000. And the IR is a little less different, with IR being 21,000 and for the Corsair anyway, and 17,000 for the Andromeda. So this is important when dealing with missiles, but also, like I said earlier, it determines when people can see you. So the larger your emission, the easier it is to be spotted, and the sooner the enemies are going to know you're there. So this is one that might surprise some people here. The Drake Corsair is slightly, ever so slightly more maneuverable than the Andromeda. Not by much, but it is. If you look at the speeds here, you'll notice that the Corsair is faster at SCM and max when compared to the Andromeda. And if you look at propulsion, you can pull more Gs on a Corsair than you can pull on an Andromeda. Again, they're not too much more, but they're there. Your rotation speed, and this is how you pitch, roll, and yaw, you can roll a lot better on the Corsair than you can on the Andromeda, but you can slightly better pitch and yaw. Again, I keep saying it, it's not that big a deal on ships of this size, but consider that it is ever so slightly more maneuverable. If we move down to logistics here, the fuel tank capacity on the Corsair is way higher than the Andromeda. It's absolutely insane. But the hydrogen and quantum fuel on this ship are phenomenal. They blow the Andromeda out of the water. The flight time, pretty crazy. Like, this is absurd. The Corsair is way better. It's not even a comparison. The charts speak for themselves. And finally, we're going to be going over the Afterburner Maneuverability and Angle Multiplicator. So what this means is that when you afterburn and turn into direction, this is the performance, the multiplier of your performance in that direction while afterburning. The Andromeda is a lot better. It's actually significantly better than the Corsair. So if you're turning while afterburning in the Z, Y, or X angles, you're going to go, you have a lot more maneuverability on it, a lot more control. It's just, overall, it's better. So now let's take a look at the actual chart here, the summary. And again, the Constellation Andromeda is in red and the Corsair is in blue. The Andromeda has the Corsair beat in stealth, which is detection range. Remember, we went over those emissions. That's how soon an enemy can detect you. And total HP. It's a little bit higher than the Corsair. The Corsair, however, has the Andromeda beat on physical armor, flight time, which doesn't matter too much, but it's there. The max speed is ever so slightly higher, as is the SCM, and the overall maneuverability of the Corsair is a little bit better. Profile is always worth noting, and you can see here that the sizes are, again, roughly the same here. Now, the profile for the Andromeda and the Corsair, I would say in practical gameplay purposes, is pretty similar. It's not going to mean too much, and let's take a look at the side. And the side is the same way. You got those big jutting wings, but they're roughly the same. The big difference here, and as always, are these two engines. The engines are very easy and pronounced to target on the Corsair, which is probably why they have so much more HP. If you watch my previous video about the Corsair, you'll see how much HP they actually have. They're very tough, they're hard to shoot off. But that was primarily the big weakness here of the Corsair. So these two ships now, even in size and profile, side and top, pretty similar. So now we're going to talk about what everybody loves and also what makes these ships very popular, which is the firepower. The Corsair, it's got a lot of that. So the pilot can control 4 size 5 weapons and 2 size 4 weapons. Typically, people will they'll gimbal these typically so that you have a bit more control. And for a ship of this size, it's pretty good to gimbal, but you don't have to. And you could, to put this in perspective, right? If you were to take the gimbals off the nose and run a full size 5 weapon, that's basically a Redeemer turret on your nose. So you can run size 5 laser cannons, and you can just shred larger ships like hammerheads that cannot maneuver away from you. I would even say that this thing is a threat to an uncrewed A2 or a very lightly crewed A2 with size 5 weapons. You don't want to mess with it. But this is my build. This is what I like to run. So, as I said, I like to run with repeaters. So I run 4 size 4 gimbaled repeaters on the nose. And for the wings, I run 2 size 3 distortion repeaters. I like that mix. I like having the distortion to really screw over larger ships. So if I am fighting something big and I do knock off the shields, the distortions mean that the HP doesn't matter. And 2 size 3 distortions is not bad, and I have a lot of shots. It also helps me kind of knock down the shields a bit, but it's not that important. But if the philosophy for that is if you're fighting, say, an Andromeda, and you take down his shields, which you will do, you'll both, if you're facing each other and you're shooting like that, and you're just duking it out, those distortions will start to shut his ship down. And then when his ship shuts down, the extra HP that he has on that Andromeda does not matter. And that is why I run distortions. Plus, you're fun. Who doesn't like distorting an enemy ship? I love it. Now, your crew controls even more repeaters. You have, on the top, in a remote turret, facing forward, you have 2 size 2 laser repeaters. And on the sides, you have 2 size 2 laser repeaters on each side for a total of 4. These do not have the best coverage. The top one has the best coverage, but still, it's not very good. If there is a light fighter on you, forget about it. It does not matter if you have gunners. If he is any kind of competent, he will get under you, and he will be able to just do whatever he wants, and you'll never hit him. It's time for you to jump away and leave. But that's why this ship is much better for fighting larger ships. But either way, this is a lot of firepower. The missile component here is, I run a lot of size 1s. I prefer quantity over quality. But in this game, even the small ones are just better overall. So you get 32. 32 size 1 missiles. It's not that bad. So moving on to the Constellation, it's a bit similar. And the biggest difference right off the bat here is the pilot-controlled firepower. While similar, you do control 4 size 4 weapons. You cannot change the bottom. They are locked to a size 4 gimbal. So you can only have 2 size 5s and 2 size 4s. You can't have 4 size 5s. In my opinion, that's a big disadvantage. I don't like that. So yes, you're pretty much running 4 size 4 weapons or bust with this thing for the pilot. What is important here is by not having those extra 2 size 4 mounts, you are unable to run gimbaled size 3 disruptors, and size 3 disruptors are the best disruptors in the game. So when the shields do go down, and if you are fighting something a bit bigger, you're going to have to whittle through that HP pool to shut them down or kill them. You're not going to be able to kind of cheat a little bit and get them shut down. So keep that in mind. Your crew, you have 2 gunners instead of 3, but keep in mind you do have the Archimedes in the back. We'll get to that later. But your turret gunners are top and bottom. These have excellent coverage. And this is where it's very different. A light fighter is not going to hurt you in a Constellation. He can never really get under your gun. It's harder, right? If he gets right up to your behind and he's close to your engines, then yes, you can't hit him even with those turrets. But that's a lot of work. Most people can't do that. So even though you've only got 2 turrets instead of 3, the coverage is a lot better on the Andromeda. Missiles, this is a missile boat. If I had to say, man, what's a missile boat in Star Citizen? It's this ship. It's a Constellation Andromeda. You cannot change these, by the way. They are bespoke to the ship. You have a total of 24 size 2s. I go with Dominator 2s. And 28 size 1s. I go with Marksmans. Again, I always go full EM. If you watch my missile video, you know why. This gives you a total of 52 missiles. If you are smart, all right, you will launch your size 1s, 1 at a time, 2 at a time, whatever it is, to pull enemy flares out, and then you'll hit them with the size 2s. So it lets a little bit of skill here. So this brings us to the question, which of these is better? I don't think one is better than the other. I think they're both excellent ships. They have pluses and minuses. If all you're looking for is pure firepower and destruction for anything that's in front of you and your crew, then the Corsair wins hands down. Absolutely. If you're looking for something a bit more durable, that has better turret coverage, and is a bit more all-around flexible, you've got the Andromeda. Now, there's a philosophy of use with both of these ships, and then after I give you the philosophy of the ships, I will then tell you what I like and why I prefer what I prefer. My philosophy on the Corsair is to take a ship that is very single-minded in its purpose. You grab your 3 gunners, and you annihilate anything that's in front of you. The Corsair will absolutely destroy the Andromeda head-on, with or without a crew. It will. Just mathematically, it'll destroy it. It's got more firepower. Its only weak spot used to be the engines and the MAV thrusters. That was fixed. It will, in a straight-up slugfest, turn the Andromeda inside out. Battles in Star Citizen do not happen in a vacuum. Alright? If you're in a fight, if you were in a hypothetical fleet battle, then I would want more Andromedas over Corsairs. If only for the extra HP and the missile payload. If you've played World of Tanks or World of Warships, then you understand the importance of team hit points or team HP. That is why I would want the Andromeda. However, with that being said, if we go back to what we talked about earlier, HP doesn't matter when distortions come into play. So, if I was even in a team fight with the Corsair, and you knock down the shields of a fully crewed Andromeda, the extra HP that ship has will not matter. It will shut down very quickly. Actually, it will shut down shockingly quickly to distortions. Even just 2 size 3s. Again, they're that good. Watch my video about distortions, and you'll see why. On the flip side, if you were in a 1v1 with the Andromeda in a Constellation, if you want the raw, honest truth, the Constellation wouldn't even have to fight it. Assuming it's a crew of 4, 4 of the 4 players inside the Corsair, so all the turrets are manned, including the pilot, and 4 players inside the Andromeda, that's the turrets manned, the pilot, and the Archimedes pilot that you can detach and launch. The Archimedes could solo the Corsair. And that's the reality. If the Corsair just didn't want to leave and wanted to try and fight the Archimedes to the death, the Archimedes alone will beat the Corsair. It doesn't have the turret coverage. It will take forever for the Archimedes to do it, but it could do it. So, weigh those options. Think about that. Is that practical in the way the game goes? No, because the game does not. Battles in the Star System do not happen in a vacuum, and that almost always never actually happens. So now I'm going to give you my answer and why I pick what I picked. I used the Corsair. I used the Corsair over the Andromeda. But for general purpose, where I'm doing bounties that may have cargo, or I'm dealing with missions on surfaces where I might have to land and kill turrets, or anything else, I want the Corsair. If only for the fact that even if I'm by myself, if I do run into something larger, including something similar like an Andromeda, I can beat it. If I'm an Andromeda, I know that if the Corsair pilot is even remotely competent, he's probably going to beat me. Unless I missile spam him, which I could do. But these are the strengths and the weaknesses of these two ships. So if I had to sum it up, the strength of the Corsair is raw forward firepower with a little bit of missiles, or the strength of the Andromeda is in its missiles and its HP pool and the snub fighter. But really, how much do you really use the snub fighter? Both ships are good. Get whichever one you like.